Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Dylan Jake, a successful architect, walked away from his pregnant girlfriend, Ava, years ago. When he learns he has a son, Gina, he returns to rebuild their relationship. Through forgiveness and second chances, Dylan discovers that love and family are built on compassion and growth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. Dylan Jake had always been the kind of man who believed in success above all else. Ambitious, driven, and relentlessly focused on his career, he had little time for personal matters, especially relationships. At the age of 28, Dylan had built a thriving architecture firm, earned respect in his field, and lived in a luxury apartment overlooking the city skyline. He had everything he'd ever wanted, or so he thought. Then there was Ava. Ava was the kind of woman who could light up any room with her smile. She was full of life, warmth, and a sense of calm that grounded Dylan in a way nothing else did. They met at a mutual friends gathering, and their connection was instant. For a time, Dylan let his guard down, embracing the happiness she brought into his life. They traveled together, shared dreams, and built a future in their minds. But, as things progressed, so did Dylan's career. His obsession with success took over, leaving Ava to feel neglected. When Ava found out she was pregnant, she was filled with mixed emotions, joy, fear, and a sense of responsibility. She tried to talk to Dylan about the future they could create together, but Dylan was distracted, consumed by work, and unsure if he was ready to take on the responsibility of fatherhood. One evening, after an argument that neither of them truly wanted to have, Dylan made a choice he would later regret. He walked away from the relationship, telling Ava he couldn't handle the pressure. Ava, devastated by his departure, decided to keep the baby on her own. She didn't want to force him into something he wasn't ready for. She moved back to her family's home, where she raised their child Gina alone. Life wasn't easy, but Ava's love for her son kept her going. She worked hard to provide for him, her heart overflowing with a love that grew every day. She never tried to reach out to Dylan. She didn't want to intrude on his life. She thought he had made his choice, and she was determined to be strong for Gina, even if it meant doing it alone. Years passed, and Dylan's life continued on its fast-paced trajectory. He achieved everything he had set out to do, but something was missing. Despite all his wealth and success, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't truly happy. He had countless business victories, but no one to share them with, no one to fill the emptiness he often felt late at night. His relationships, superficial at best, left him feeling more isolated. One day, out of nowhere, Dylan received an email from a lawyer's office. It was a brief message asking him to contact them about a matter related to an old personal case. Confused, he hesitated before dialing the number. When the lawyer picked up, Dylan was informed that Ava had reached out to them with a request for him to meet their son. It turned out that Gina had been diagnosed with a condition that required him to know more about his biological father's medical history. The lawyer's tone was respectful but firm, urging Dylan to come to terms with his past. The words hit Dylan like a ton of bricks. He had a son, Gina. He had a child he didn't know existed. And it had been years since he walked away from Avath. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Dylan couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. He felt guilty, regretful, and terrified. The decision to walk away from Ava seemed like the worst mistake he had ever made. How could he have abandoned her when she needed him most? How could he have walked away from his own flesh and blood? Dylan's mind raced as he called Ava. She answered the phone quietly, as if she had been waiting for him to reach out. Ava. Dylan started, his voice shaky. Gina, I'm so sorry. I didn't know I should have been there. I don't know what to say. Ava's voice was calm, but there was a hint of sadness. You don't have to say anything, Dylan. I never expected you to come back. I made my peace with it a long time ago. Gina is a wonderful boy. He's everything to me. But if you want to meet him, you can. It's not about us anymore. It's about him. A lump formed in Dylan's throat. The love Ava had for their son, the selflessness, was clear in her voice. Despite everything he had put her through, she had moved on, raising their son with all the love and care he could have ever needed. And yet, she was offering him the chance to be a part of Gina's life. She was offering him a second chance, not for their sake, but for their sakes. Dylan flew to the small town where Ava and Gina lived, unsure of what to expect. He was nervous, overwhelmed, and full of self-doubt. But as soon as he saw them, something inside him clicked. Ava was standing on the porch of a modest house, holding a young boy in her arms. Gina was no longer the baby Dylan remembered. He was a bright-eyed, curious 6-year-old with a smile that reminded Dylan of Ava's. Gina ran toward him the moment he saw him, calling out, "Are you my dad?" Dylan knelt down and wrapped his arms around Gina. It was awkward at first, but the moment felt right. There was no resentment, no anger, just an overwhelming sense of love. Gina's innocent questions, his genuine curiosity about Dylan, broke through the walls Dylan had built around his heart. "I didn't know what to expect," Dylan said quietly to Ava later that evening. "I didn't know if I deserved this chance, but I can't imagine my life without him now." Ava smiled softly, her eyes full of kindness and understanding. "You've always had a place in his life, Dylan, and you've always had a place in mine. It's not too late. I never expected you to come back, but I always believed that things could change. That's why I didn't close the door completely. People can grow. Dylan, you've grown, and you're here now. That's all that matters." Over the following months, Dylan made an effort to be a consistent part of Gina's life. It wasn't always easy. He had to find a balance between his career and his newfound family. But with Ava's gentle encouragement and Gina's unguarded love, Dylan began to heal. The guilt he carried for so long started to fade as he grew closer to Gina and began to understand the depth of the love that had been waiting for him. Eventually, Dylan and Ava became friends once again, their bond rooted in mutual respect and shared love for their son. They began to co-parent, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to give Gina the best life possible. In time, Dylan realized that love wasn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about second chances, kindness, and the compassion to accept the past, no matter how painful. The life he had built, while successful, hadn't given him the fulfillment he found in being a father. It was love and kindness that brought him home, that healed the wounds of the past, and gave him a future filled with hope. And as he watched Gina grow surrounded by love and support, Dylan understood the true meaning of family. It wasn't about the mistakes you made, it was about the compassion to try again and the strength to love, no matter the past. As the months passed, Dylan's relationship with Gina grew stronger, but the path was not without its challenges. He had missed so much of Gina's life, and while Gina was quick to accept him, there was a part of Dylan that felt like an outsider. The guilt he felt for abandoning Ava and Gina weighed heavily on him. He had spent so much time focusing on his career, his ambition, his success, that he had completely overlooked the importance of love, family, and the simple joys of life. But with each day, he felt himself changing. He started to see the world through Gina's innocent eyes, a world where love didn't need to be perfect, where mistakes were part of the journey, and where a second chance was possible. Slowly, Gina began to show Dylan what true joy felt like. The small moments, the laughter over dinner, the bedtime stories, the spontaneous adventures to the park. One evening, as Dylan sat on the porch with Gina, the young boy turned to him with a question that struck Dylan to his core. "Are you going to stay with us forever?" Gina asked, his voice full of hope. Dylan paused, his heart swelling with emotion. "I want to, Gina. I want to stay with you and your mum, forever." Gina beamed, his eyes lighting up. "I'm glad," he said, jumping into Dylan's lap and wrapping his arms around him. Dylan held him close, overcome by the depth of the moment. It wasn't just about being there physically, it was about showing up emotionally, giving them the love and support they both needed. Dylan was learning what it meant to truly be a father. He had made mistakes in the past, but now he was determined to make things right. Back in the city, Dylan had continued his work, but now with a new perspective. He had found a better balance between his career and his family life. He no longer allowed himself to get lost in endless meetings and late nights. At the office, he began taking breaks to visit Gina and Ava more frequently, spending weekends with them, making sure he was an active part of their lives. Ava, too, had seen the changes in Dylan. She had always loved him, but her love for him had transformed over the years into a quiet acceptance. They had both grown Dylan into a man who understood the value of family and love beyond career. Ava into a woman who had created a life full of resilience and grace, even after all the pain. One evening, as they all sat together at the dinner table, Dylan turned to Ava, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Ava, I want to thank you," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "You've taught me so much about what really matters. You've been so strong, so patient, and so understanding. You didn't have to give me a second chance, but you did, and I will never take that for granted." Ava smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "Dylan, I never expected things to go the way they did, but I'm glad we're here now. We've both grown, and we've done it together." It's not perfect, but it's real. Dylan reached across the table and took her hand, a silent understanding passing between them. There was no need for words, just a quiet acknowledgement of the shared journey they had been on. They were no longer the same people they were when they first met. They had both made mistakes, but they had also found redemption. They had both learned that love wasn't about perfection, it was about growth, forgiveness, and compassion. As the days passed, they continued to co-parent Gina together, making decisions as a team. They weren't romantically involved, but their bond was strong, built on respect and shared love for their son. The connection between Dylan and Ava was no longer burdened by resentment or guilt. It was a partnership rooted in the understanding that they both wanted the best for Gina. Then, one day, Dylan was sitting on the couch with Gina, playing with toys, when the boy suddenly turned to him with another question. "Daddy, do you think we could all go on a trip together like a real family?" Gina asked, his voice hopeful. The question took Dylan by surprise. It had been so long since he had thought about what it meant to be a family, to truly share experiences together. The idea of a family trip, one where they could create new memories without the past hanging over them, was something he had never considered. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Dylan said, his heart full. "I'll talk to your mom, and we'll make it happen." The following month, the three of them, Dylan, Ava, and Gina, embarked on a road trip together. They traveled to a small beach town where they stayed in a cozy cottage by the sea. The trip was simple, but for Dylan it was a turning point. It was the first time in years that he truly felt like part of a family. He and Ava shared late-night talks on the porch while Gina slept soundly inside. They went on walks along the shore, played games in the sand, and enjoyed each other's company in a way they never had before. For Dylan, the trip symbolized the transformation he had gone through. He had once been lost in his pursuit of success, but now, surrounded by the people he loved, he realized that this was what truly mattered. It was the connections, the love, the memories they were creating together that would sustain him. His wealth or accolades. At the end of the trip, as they stood on the beach, watching the sunset, Dylan looked at Ava and Gina. His heart was full, and for the first time in a long time, he felt complete. "I'm so grateful for this," Dylan said quietly. "For all of you." Ava smiled, her eyes warm. "You're home now, Dylan, and that's all that matters." As they drove home from the beach, with Gina dozing in the back seat, Dylan felt a sense of peace settle within him. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone anymore. He had his family, and they had each other. No amount of success or wealth could ever replace that. Dylan had learned the true meaning of love and family. It wasn't about never making mistakes or being perfect. It was about showing up, forgiving, and choosing to love unconditionally. And in that, Dylan found his true happiness. As the months and years passed, Dylan and Ava had settled into a peaceful, functional co-parenting relationship. Their son, Gina, thrived with the love and support of both of his parents. Dylan had learned to appreciate the little moments, the evening walks with Gina, the family dinners, the Sunday mornings spent reading together on the couch. He had never expected that his path would lead here toward a quiet, joyful family life with the woman he once thought he had lost forever. The guilt he had carried for years, that heavy feeling of walking away from Ava and their son, had faded. Every day, he tried to make up for the time he had missed. Yet, deep down, there remained a sense of unspoken tension between him and Ava, invisible barrier they had never fully addressed. They had learned to work together for the sake of Gina, but there was still an unhealed wound between them. And, as time passed, Dylan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to their past, a truth about their relationship that he hadn't fully understood. One evening, as Dylan was helping Gina with his homework at the kitchen table, Ava returned home from an errand with an envelope in her hand. She looked unsettled, her expression distant. She placed the envelope on the counter without saying a word, and Dylan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The moment felt significant, as if something was about to shift in the air between them. "Ava," he asked softly, walking over to her. "What's that?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's something I should have told you a long time ago," she said, her voice strained. Dylan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear what was coming next, but he opened the envelope anyway. Inside, there was a stack of papers, and as he flipped through them, his eyes landed on a single document that made his blood run cold. It was a paternity test. His hands shook as he read the results. "Gina is not your biological son." A cold silence filled the room as Dylan looked up at Ava, confusion and disbelief clouding his thoughts. What is this, Ava?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. How could this be?" Ava's eyes were full of tears now, and her face, which had once been so full of warmth, now looked drained of color. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself to face the truth. Dylan, she began, her voice trembling, when you left, I didn't know how to tell you this, but Gina, he's not yours. He's Victor's. She paused, her eyes welling with tears as she spoke. Victor Hartley, the man I was with before you. We were together briefly after we broke up, and that's when I got pregnant, but I didn't want to tell you. I was afraid it would destroy you, destroy everything we had, so I kept it from you. Dylan's mind spun as he processed her words. Victor, the name seemed so far removed from the life he had built with Ava, the idea that he had spent years building a relationship with a child who wasn't biologically his, shattered the world he had carefully constructed in his mind. But then, in the midst of his turmoil, something else rose to the surface, the undeniable love he had for Gina. The bond they shared wasn't defined by biology, wasn't defined by a test. It was real, it was deep, and it was undeniable. I don't know what to say, Dylan said, his voice heavy with a mixture of pain and confusion. Why didn't you tell me sooner? All these years, I could have handled it. Ava cut him off gently, her voice filled with regret. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought that if you knew, you'd leave us for good. I was scared. Dylan, I didn't want to lose you, so I kept this secret. But the truth is, Gina has always been yours in every way that matters. I never wanted you to feel different about him. I never wanted to take that from you. Dylan stared at the paternity test in his hands, the weight of the truth settling heavily on him. But as he looked at Ava, then at Gina, who was still sitting at the table, blissfully unaware of the storm that had just hit, something inside him clicked. This was still his son. The love he felt for Gina had nothing to do with genetics. It had everything to do with the time, the memories, the laughter, the tears. They had built something together, and no matter who his biological father was, Gina was his son in every sense that mattered. I'm not going anywhere, Dylan said, his voice stronger now, filled with conviction. Gina is my son Ava. No matter what the papers say, no matter what the test says, he's mine. Ava's face softened as she looked at Dylan, the weight in her eyes lifted, as if a burden she had carried for years had finally been shared. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you for understanding. The next few days were filled with raw emotions. Dylan spent a lot of time reflecting on the years he had lost, the relationships he had built on false assumptions, and the family he had thought he knew so well. But as he looked at Gina, who seemed completely unfazed by the revelation, he realized something important. The love he had for the boy had never been tied to blood. It was a bond forged in the everyday moments of life, building Lego castles, reading bedtime stories, and sharing laughter over dinner. That was what truly made them family. Over the next few weeks, things slowly began to shift. Dylan continued to be a constant presence in Gina's life, and as for Ava, their relationship grew more open and honest than ever before. While there were difficult conversations ahead, especially with Victor, who had been informed of the situation, they knew that their future was one built on trust, love, and understanding. Then, just as Dylan thought everything was beginning to settle, there was one final twist. Victor reached out to him. He was angry at first, resentful of the years he had lost with Gina, but after a long conversation, Victor admitted that he had never been a true father to Gina. He had made peace with the fact that Ava had chosen to raise him alone, and although the revelation had shaken him, he respected Dylan's place in Gina's life. I don't know what to say, Victor had told Dylan, his voice soft. I never expected this, but Gina deserves to have both of us in his life. You've been there for him when I wasn't, and for that, I owe you an apology. It was a difficult and awkward conversation, but ultimately, it brought clarity. Dylan realized that he didn't need Victor's approval. What mattered was that Gina had a father who loved him, and Gina had people who cared enough to try and make things right. Months later, things had settled into a new routine. Dylan, Ava, and Gina shared holidays together, sometimes awkwardly, but always with the goal of showing Gina what true family meant, of support and forgiveness. The bond between Dylan and Gina had only grown stronger, and despite the twists and turns, Dylan knew that he was exactly where he needed to be. The love and kindness that had once felt out of reach had finally come full circle, and for the first time, Dylan felt whole, not because of wealth or success, but because of the family he had chosen to be a part of, a family that, despite the hidden truths and past mistakes, was stronger than ever before. And as he looked at Gina, he realized that the boy was more than just his son, he was his redemption. As the years passed, Dylan, Ava, and Gina found a new rhythm to their lives, one forged from the fires of painful truths, past mistakes, and, most importantly, an unwavering commitment to love. The bond between them had deepened beyond anything Dylan could have imagined when he first re-entered their lives. What began as a journey of redemption had transformed into a story of true love, compassion, and healing. One quiet evening, as they all sat in the living room, Gina curled up on the couch reading a book while Dylan and Ava shared a moment of peace. They had come so far from the night Dylan had first learned the truth. What had once been a painful revelation was now just another chapter in their shared history. The tension that once existed between them had dissolved, replaced by a love and understanding that grew stronger every day. Ava looked at Dylan, a gentle smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She no longer felt the weight of the secret she had kept for so long. Her heart was full, knowing that Dylan had embraced Gina as his own, and that he had never wavered, despite the shock of the truth. "I can't believe how far we've come," Ava said softly, her voice filled with quiet wonder. "It feels like a lifetime ago that everything was so complicated. But now I can't imagine life any other way." Dylan reached out and took her hand, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. "You've taught me so much, Ava, about what it means to love, to forgive, and to show up when it matters most. I thought I had everything figured out before, but I didn't. You, Gina, this family, have given me a love I never even knew I needed." Ava's heart swelled at his words, and for the first time she felt that the scars from their past had faded, replaced by something far more beautiful, a love that was unconditional, compassionate, and enduring. She leaned forward, her voice full of emotion. "I never thought we'd be here, Dylan, but I'm so glad we are. I don't regret a single moment of this journey because it led me to you, to Gina, to this life we've built together." Dylan's heart raced as he gazed into her eyes. The connection between them, once strained by distance and misunderstanding, now felt like a deep, unbreakable thread that bound them together. He knew that the love he felt for Ava was far deeper than he had ever realized. It wasn't just a love born out of a shared past, it was a love forged in the present, one that had grown with each step they took, hand in hand, without another word. He leaned in and kissed her softly, passionately. The kiss was tender at first, but as they both gave in to the emotions that had been building between them for years, it deepened. In that kiss, there was an entire history of pain, of regret, of healing, and of love. It was a promise, a vow that no matter what had happened before, they would face the future together. No secrets, no barriers, just love, pure, fierce, and real. As they pulled apart, breathing heavily, Dylan smiled softly at Ava, his heart swelling with love for the woman who had been through so much. "I'll never leave you, Ava. Not again. I'm here, always." Gina, who had been watching from the couch with a small, knowing smile, looked up from his book. "You two are so mushy," he teased, his innocent voice cutting through the tender moment. And Ava both laughed, their hearts lighter than they had ever felt. The bond they shared was unbreakable now, not just through the highs and lows, but through the tenderness of moments like this. And as they looked at Gina, they knew they had created something beautiful together. In the quiet of that moment, as the sun began to set and the golden light spilled over the room, Dylan held Ava close, knowing with every fiber of his being that the love they shared was not just a fleeting emotion. It was a force afire that had burned through their past mistakes, lighting the way for their future. Together they were stronger than they had ever been, and as they embraced, the world outside seemed to fade away. There was only them, this family they had built, and the love they had earned, one piece at a time. Compassion, forgiveness, and passionate love were the pillars that held them together now. And no matter what the future held, they would face it together, united by a love that had withstood the test of time and come out stronger than ever, that with Gina nestled safely between them. The three of them held tight to each other, knowing that no matter what the world might throw their way, their love would always be their greatest strength. It was a love born from their shared struggles, their forgiveness, and their unwavering devotion to one another. And in that love, they had found something greater than they had ever dreamed. True happiness, true family, and a love that would last a lifetime. As time went on, Dylan, Ava, and Gina built a life together that was grounded in understanding, compassion, and a love that had been tested and ultimately strengthened by the trials they had faced. Each day brought new challenges, but their commitment to one another remained unwavering. They grew together not just as a family, but as individuals. Dylan, who had once been consumed by ambition, learned the true value of relationships. Ava, who had carried the weight of secrets and solitude, learned that love wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. Together, Gina, now flourishing under the love and attention of both his parents, had become a symbol of the growth they had all experienced. He was bright, kind-hearted, and full of curiosity, everything they had hoped he would be. The three of them spent countless days together, traveling, learning, and building memories. It was a life full of joy, the kind that Dylan had never thought possible. What had once seemed like a shattered dream had turned into a beautiful, vibrant reality. But one evening, as they sat together after dinner, something shifted. Gina, who had been growing up so quickly, suddenly turned to Dylan with a question that stopped him in his tracks. "Dad," Gina said, his voice sincere and thoughtful, "how did you and Mom get back together? You didn't always get along, right? So how did you make it work?" Dylan looked at Ava, a soft smile tugging at his lips. They both knew that the path they had traveled together wasn't always easy. There had been difficult conversations, long silences, and moments of doubt, but they had never given up on each other. And now, with Gina's innocent question hanging in the air, Dylan realized that what they had built together had become more than just a second chance. It had become a story of resilience, growth, and love. "A lot of things changed," Dylan said slowly, his eyes meeting Ava's. "We both grew. I had to learn to listen, to show up, to understand. Ava had to forgive me, and she had to trust that I would be there for both of you. But the most important thing I learned is that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. It's something you work at, something you nurture every day." Ava nodded, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "When we first got together, we didn't know what the future would look like. But through the pain, the mistakes, and the hard lessons, we learned that love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. We've both had our share of regrets, but in the end, it was our willingness to grow that brought us back together, and we've built something stronger than either of us could have imagined." Gina smiled, his face lighting up with the kind of understanding that only a child could have. He may not have fully understood the complexities of adult relationships, but he understood love, true, unconditional love. The lesson was clear, not just for Gina but for everyone who had witnessed the story of Dylan and Ava's journey. Love wasn't about finding the perfect partner or living a perfect life. It wasn't about avoiding mistakes or never facing hardships. Love was about choosing to be present, to forgive, to grow, and to be vulnerable. It was about the small, everyday moments of connection that built a life, brick by brick. As the years passed, Dylan and Ava's bond grew even stronger. They continued to build their lives together with the same love and compassion that had brought them back together. They became mentors to others, sharing their story of healing, growth, and redemption. Their non-profit work expanded, helping others who had faced similar challenges. They spoke at events, sharing the lessons they had learned, and offering hope to those who felt lost. But more than anything, they focused on their family and Gina, who was now growing into a compassionate young man, and on each other. They never forgot the hard lessons they had learned, and they worked every day to ensure that love remained the center of their lives. One quiet evening, years after the journey had begun, Dylan stood by the window of their home, looking out at the world beyond. Ava joined him, and together, they watched the sunset. The sky painted with vibrant shades of pink and gold. "I never thought we'd get here," Dylan said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. "There were so many times I thought I had lost everything. But now, I see that everything I needed was right here all along." Ava smiled and took his hand. "Love doesn't always come the way you expect it to, but when you choose to work at it, to fight for it, it becomes the most beautiful thing in the world." They stood together in the stillness, hand in hand, knowing that they had finally found peace not just in each other, but in themselves. The story of Dylan, Ava, and Gina is a testament to the power of second chances, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of love. It shows us that love isn't about perfection, it's about resilience. It's about showing up, even when the road gets tough. It's about choosing each other, every day, through the highs and lows. For those who listen to this story, the message is clear. Life is full of challenges and mistakes, but it's how we learn, grow, and choose to love through those challenges that shapes who we become. True love isn't found in fairy tale endings or flawless relationships, it's built in the messy, imperfect moments that we navigate together. It's about embracing the hurt, learning from it, and using it as a foundation to build something beautiful and lasting. And in the end, love, real, deep, compassionate love's always worth the effort.